On point 1, we discuss the historic India-EU free trade agreement due to be announced tomorrow in New Delhi. On point 2, Madhav's deep dive into the changing global order and India's position in a News9 exclusive interview. And now let's take a quick look at the headlines. Military might and indigenous defense on display at 77th Republic Day Parade as BrahMos, Akash, Suryastra, Arjun and Bhishma roll out at Kartavya Path. India's massive Operation Sindoor supremacy as Swiss think tank reveals Pakistan Air Force failed to counter and was forced to seek ceasefire. China's top general accused of leaking nuclear secrets to US as Xi Jinping continues purge of top military staff. India and the European Union are set to announce the conclusion of their long-awaited free trade agreement at a high-level summit in New Delhi on January 27th, when Prime Minister Narendra Modi meets European Council President Antonio Costa and European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen.
We are on the cusp of a historic trade agreement. Indeed, some call it the mother of all deals. One that would create a market of 2 billion people, accounting for almost a quarter of global GDP. And crucially, that would provide a first-mover advantage for Europe with one of the world's fastest-growing and most dynamic continents.
The summit comes amid growing global uncertainty triggered by disruptions in economic and security policies under the Trump administration, pushing both India and Europe to seek stable and strategic partners. Alongside the trade pact, the two sides are expected to firm up a strategic defense partnership and a framework for the mobility of Indian professionals. The EU is already among India's top trading partners alongside the United States and China, with total goods and services trade exceeding $190 billion in 24-25. India exported around $76 billion worth of goods and $30 billion in services to the 27-nation bloc during the year. While average EU tariffs on Indian goods stand at about 3.8%, labor-intensive sectors such as textiles and garments face duties of around 10%. The proposed FTA could restore competitiveness lost after the EU withdrew tariff concessions under its generalized system of preferences in 2023 on products including garments, pharmaceuticals and machinery. India is also pushing for easier movement of professionals and greater access for its IT services. From the European side, export to India currently face a much higher weighted average tariff of about 9.3% on goods worth over $60 billion. Automobiles, chemicals and plastic face particularly steep duties. Tariff cuts could unlock new opportunities for European companies in cars, machinery, aircraft and chemicals, while improving access to services, procurement and investment in one of the world's fastest growing major markets. However, several red flags remain. Agriculture and dairy have been excluded from the deal. India is resisting EU demands to eliminate tariffs on more than 95% of goods, preferring a ceiling closer to 90%. Automobiles, wines and spirits remain sensitive sectors, with India favouring phased cuts or limited quotas. Delhi has also raised concerns over the EU's carbon border levy and strict regulatory standards, while seeking data secure status, easier mobility for professionals and relief from double social security contributions. The EU, meanwhile, is pushing for wider access to India's financial and legal services and stronger commitments on labour, environment and intellectual property. India and EU have been strategic partners since 2004. Their relationship dates back to 1962, when India first established ties with the European Economic Community. Trade talks began in 2007, stalled in 14 and were revived in 22. Geopolitically, the deal reflects a shared commitment to a multipolar world and strategic autonomy. Both sides are seeking to reduce dependence on China and hedge against volatility in US trade policy. The EU is now India's largest trading partner in goods, and European companies already create about 8 million jobs in India. Demographically and economically, the two sides complement each other. India offers a young, expanding workforce and a high growth, while Europe brings capital, technology, and regulatory strength. If concluded, this agreement would rank among the largest bilateral trade deals in the world and signal that India and Europe are ready to shape a new economic and strategic partnership in an increasingly fragmented global order. On this issue, I am joined by Ambassador Veena Sikri. I am also joined by Ambassador Ujjwal Singh Bhatia, former Indian Ambassador to WTO, Sherry Malhotra, Deputy Director, Strategic Studies Program, ORF, and Abhijit Das, former Head, Center for WTO Studies, Indian Institute of Foreign Trade. Thank you all of you for joining me. I'll take the opening comments from Ambassador Veena Sikri. Madam.
Well, I think this is a good and potentially great moment for the relationship between India and the EU. Because as you know, as you said, the negotiation started early in the 2000s, but then it stalled. And the revival in 22 of the negotiations has been a great positive for the India-EU relationship, because we know that in the meanwhile, the problems with the US market and the EU-US relationship facing a great rift over the Greenland issue has now caused the European Union to look actively towards countries like India, even because at the same time, their relationship with China is, considered one of strategic sensitivity, and they don't want to put too many eggs in the China basket anymore. So it is indeed a great moment, but we have to be aware of the difficulties, and no doubt there are some. Tomorrow the deal will not be signed, but it could be announced, and then it has to be ratified by all the EU members, which is a long process. We don't know how long it will take. Individual countries could raise individual concerns, which will be a problem. But there are problems like the carbon border tax, which we consider as a non-tariff barrier, which will make Indian goods less competitive in the market. But we do think that because of this free trade agreement, goods like textiles, on which countries like Bangladesh had an advantage, we could then come up to that, and it could increase our textile exports to the EU substantially.
Okay.
I think in automobiles there's a good chance. Automobile components, I think, is a very good prospect. But all in all, because the EU is the single largest trading partner for India now, and given the problems...
Yes, on automobiles, Madam, Reuters have done a story which is talking about 40% reduction in the automobile sector. But let me straight away go to Ambassador Bhatia, sir. How long will it take to actualize, and what will be the larger impact on the Indian economy, keeping in mind the sort of tariff stress we face today because of America? Sir.
Well, these two questions. Let me start by saying that this deal sends at least 4 very big messages to the world. The first is that India is open for business and that it is willing to integrate with global supply chains, but on its own terms. Secondly, for both sides, it reduces overdependence on China and Chinese-driven supply chains. Thirdly, I think the uncertainty and volatility in US policies, it addresses that issue and sends a message to the United States that they are not the only game in town. And lastly, and I think this is a very important message, despite all the hype about the breakdown of the global rules-based order, important countries are still willing and able to do deals under WTO rules. And I think this is something very, very significant. You asked about how long it will take. I think there are 2-3 aspects here. One is that there are 3 parallel negotiations taking place. One is the one which you talked about on basically on tariffs and so on and so forth. But there is a separate negotiation going on investment. And there is a third negotiation on geographical indications. And as of now, we are not aware of the timelines for these 2. As far as how long it will take to actually fructify and get into effect, Let me give you the example of the European Mercosur deal, which was completed a few weeks back. Now that has hit a major roadblock because the European Parliament has frozen that deal, referred it to the European Court of Justice, and that may take maybe 2 years or more for it to come back. Now, as far in the best case scenario, once the deal is done between India and Europe, it should take the European Parliament about 1 year to ratify at least, and India will itself have its own processes. So I would say safely at least 1 year.
Ratify. Sherry, another aspect of this entire relationship is the comprehensive defense. Now, in context of defense, India's partnership with France had remained strong, Germany in bits and pieces when it came to submarines, but primarily it has been with the Soviet Union and then Russia, United States of America and Israel. So in context of strategic partnership, does it have a future beyond trade, madam?
Well, absolutely. And thank you for asking this question, because I think the strategic, the security and defense element of this partnership is going to grow more and more important. As you rightly mentioned, India does have robust defense ties with a lot of member states, France, Germany, but also Spain and Italy. And in recent years, we've seen India's defense exports to Europe actually rising, particularly in areas such as ammunition, given that Europe's own stockpiles are now depleting due to the Ukraine war. And if we go back to the year 2022, the EU released its strategic compass, which mentions security and defense partnerships, these new arrangements as core pillars of the EU's foreign and security policy. And we are seeing now that is what the EU is also going to be signing with India during this trip, during the summit. So far, the EU has about 8 SDPs, security and defense partnerships. There are 5 in Europe. It has 1 with Canada, 2 in Asia with Japan and South Korea, and the one with India is likely to be the 3rd now in Asia. So these SDPs are new frameworks of cooperation that are aimed at strengthening bilateral relations that the EU already has with non-EU like-minded countries. The SDPs are non-legally binding instruments, so they don't have any military obligations, and they offer flexibility, which, as we know, is very important for a country like India that does not like to be part of alliances or treaty systems. So one of the things that the SDP will do, it will offer a way for India to participate in EU defense initiatives, such as the PESCO, the Permanent Structured Cooperation Arrangement, and it will perhaps give access for India to access the EU's SAFE instrument, the Security Action for Europe instrument. This is a €150 billion instrument that the EU has created in terms of joint procurement. So I think going forward, the SDP will be very important in ramping up the strategic part of this partnership. It will provide further access to each other's defense markets with opportunities for co-production of equipment. Remember, India offers things like cost effectiveness. It offers potential to scale. It offers a developing defense industrial ecosystem. And Europe is trying to diversify its defense supply chains, especially given the problems with the United States and the fact that US security guarantees are now looking less and less secure. So this, I think, will be an opportunity for collaboration between India and Europe, especially as EU member states have also committed to spend 5% of their GDPs on defense. And my last point is that it will also help India to gain access to European technologies and advanced capabilities, which again is important for India.
Absolutely. So, that's the rosy side of the picture. Mr. Das, what are the pain points? Even with the American negotiators, agriculture and dairy was a big pain point. Even in this context, the Europeans are pushing for agriculture and dairy. Well, unlike United States of America and Europe, agriculture is not an industry in this country. It's part of culture and livelihood. There's a huge difference the way agriculture is perceived, practiced and seen. So what are the pain points when it comes to India and EU, sir?
Thank you, Kartikeya, for having me on your program. The pain points, to start with, Ambassador Veena Sikri has already mentioned. The biggest pain point is CBAM, Carbon Border Adjustment Measure. Much of the market access that will become available to India subsequent to the European Union lowering or eliminating tariffs, some of it will get eroded and Indian exports will become less competitive on account of CBAM. So that's the first pain point. Agriculture, to my mind, is less difficult to negotiate with the European Union because some of the member states, particularly France, Spain, Portugal, they have their own sensitivities. So unlike the United States, European Union is less likely to be aggressive in seeking market opening in India in the agriculture sector. In the manufacturing sector, a big pain point really will be the automobile sector, where if we have to extrapolate the concessions which India gave to the UK under the CETA with UK, if pro rata India gives European Union market access, then we might end up compromising the future of our domestic electric vehicle industry. So in the manufacturing sector, that will be a pain point. But there are a whole host of other pain points which many people may really not even be aware. Trade is a very small part of the present-day free trade agreements. To give you an illustration, if you look at the free trade agreements recently signed by European Union, it has chapters on energy and raw material, which is really aimed at resource grab. European Union had made a very ambitious proposal to India. It's in the public domain. That's really aimed at grabbing resources, preventing India to make full use of its own natural resources, trying to get ownership over Indian natural resources. So that certainly is an issue of concern. Then another area where European Union had made a very ambitious proposal to India relates to something called sustainable food systems, where the objective is twofold. Number one, to secure a legal right to erect barriers to India's exports of agriculture products on the grounds that Indian agriculture is not sustainable, and sustainability would be defined by the European Union. And that could also have implications for our agriculture, let us say in Punjab, Haryana, Western Uttar Pradesh, where there is a general consensus that on account of use of fertilizers or on account of use of electricity for pumping, the water table is going down, the soil is becoming toxic. So the provisions in India EU FTA, if we are to go by EU's first request to India, those could have constraining implications. Then there could be implications in the intellectual property sector as well.
Okay.
So my limited submission here is that we need to look at chapters which go beyond conventional trade chapters, and that is where the real pain point will be.
Okay.
In a nutshell, in the short run, excellent free trade agreement, but in the medium to long term, there will be pain points and there will be issues of concern that will arise.
Okay. It's time for a short break, but my question when I come back will be to Ambassador Sikri, and I'll open it for everyone, that where do our strategic priorities come together when it comes to India and Europe, but after a short break.
रश्मि,
हाँ?
ये मैडम बड़े शहर से छोटे शहर बसने जा रही है, बताओ।
अंकल
इंडिया के छोटे छोटे शहरों में ही तो है बड़े बड़े अखाड़े।
नए नए दावपेच सीखेगी और फ्यूचर में मेडल जीतेगी। और बेटा इनका फ्यूचर?
बड़े पापा, SBI लाइफ से इनका फ्यूचर सिक्योर है।
अभी तो इसकी जीत के इरादा पक्का है। करो पूरे अपने इरादे,
अपनों से किए सभी वादे।
SBI लाइफ अपने लिए,
अपनों के लिए।
घर है वही जहाँ सब संग हो, रिश्तों को रंग दो, दुनिया को रंग दो।
Birla Opus Paints.
Indian Racing Festival. Only on Star Sports and Jio Hotstar.
तेरी एक जिद और फैक्ट्री वर्कर्स सब डबल।
रिटायर हो जाऊं क्या?
अच्छा, प्रॉपर्टी के अगेंस्ट लोन का आइडिया किसका था? पर बुढ़ापा आ गया हो।
इनकी जिद ने कारोबार भी बढ़ाया और रोजगार भी। टाटा कैपिटल लोन अगेंस्ट प्रॉपर्टी के साथ।
Ambassador Sikri, is there a singularity when it comes to European Union? You know, Americans have a singularity in terms of their strategic priorities, defense. The Chinese have it, the Russians have it. But does EU as a bloc has a singularity? Because when we are dealing with them, we are dealing with multiple countries.
Yes, that is true that the European Union's system of operation, what they do in practice, the European members of parliament, and then we have bilateral good relations and good agreements and strategic partnerships with, with France, with Germany, with many other individual countries. So within the European Union, the degree of India's closeness and strategic cooperation with individual countries varies. But I think it is significant that the European Union, as I said, from 2022 onwards, is showing the move towards India. Earlier, they were just not interested. Human rights was one of their biggest areas of interest, and they keep lecturing to India on human rights and so on. But now we have been seeing the European Union interested in the Indian economy, and the Greenland factor as a breaking point in the European Union-US trust partnership and the trust deficit that has arisen on both sides because of that between the US and the EU has caused them to even further activate. They're looking for partnerships with India and other what they call middle countries. And India and European Union have always had a good partnership on climate change, for example, on energy. These are areas, and on defense, as you know, with France and now even with Germany, good partnerships on these areas. So all these areas coming together in this, what is described as the mother of all deals, could potentially signal a big change in the coming decades on India's reliance. It is already the biggest partner for India, the India-EU trade partnership, and now looking at investments and services. We want migration mobility as well. This is another important area that we are looking at and that should come out of this agreement, the migration mobility to be enhanced between India and the EU, because that again will signal a move away from the USA because of the problem with the H-1B visa over there. So I think all in all, the revival and the new perspective which India and the EU are looking at each other are good for both of us.
Okay, let me then rephrase this question for Ambassador Bhatia. Sir, the heart of diplomacy is the national interest. The rest can come later. So, what is in India's interest when we say India, EU, FTA is mother of all deals?
Well, let me point to 4 areas of integration, and I think it's important that we seek closer integration with the European Union in these 4 areas. And Shairi mentioned the first one of them, which is the defense and security and defense partnership. I think we need closer integration with the European Union in defense supply chains, not only for trade purposes, but also for strategic purposes of diversifying our sources from Russia, from United States, and developing a third important source. The second issue is about digital trade, and I think there needs to be closer integration between the protection laws, the data protection laws, the GDPR in the European Union, and the India's DPDP, and I think we need to synergize between these two so that we can obtain this status of data secure supplier. And the third issue is about environment. Both of us agree on the features of the Paris Agreement, including the flexibilities provided to developing countries. And I think that provides us a building block for developing our cooperation on environment, climate change, and so on. And the last issue I'd like to mention is about the CBAM. Now, if the European Union has its CBAM, India also has a carbon trading scheme, the CCTS. And I think we need to look at how the two areas can be brought together so that they are interoperable. And to that extent, many of the sticking points that were mentioned can be preempted and obviated.
Okay, Sherry, I have a very specific question for you. Do you think that issues like Ukraine can be a stumbling block? You know, foreign minister had to snub Poland in context of Pakistan. The countries can speak in, multiple voices.
Well, I think so far, India and Europe have managed the Ukraine problem quite well. They have not let it get in the way of a deepening EU-India strategic partnership. I think paradoxically, what we've actually seen over the last almost 4 years, I think it's going to be the of the Russia-Ukraine war this year. What been against the backdrop of the Russia-Ukraine war? The EU-India free trade negotiations were relaunched in 2022 against the backdrop of the war. The EU-India Trade and Technology Council, the TTC, was formulated against the backdrop of this war. So I think in a way, the EU and India have sort of agreed to disagree on the Russia question because you have a very volatile global backdrop, right? You have on the one hand China's assertive behavior strategically in the Indo-Pacific, China's unfair trading practices. You also have, of course, Donald Trump's second presidency, which has literally wreaked havoc globally. So I think in their larger strategic interest, they have sort of decided to agree to disagree on the Russia question. But I think going forward, especially as the EU and India will also deepen not just the trade partnership, but also the security dimension of the partnership, the Russia question could become salient when it comes to things like sensitive things like tech transfers.
You know, it's like it's a deal. It's like an elephant thing. You know, you touch a part and you imagine what it is like. So, Mr. Das, I'll read you a headline of DW. It says, in what has been called a victory for free trade, the EU and India are set to agree on the mother of all deals and the defense pact that aims to lure India away from its close political and military ties to Russia. That's DW. So, I mean to say, you can imagine the deal the way you want to. So, that's the tilt which the DW has given to an Indian deal. So, my point is that are these versions correct? That, you know, we will be redeciding, reprioritizing our old relationship, which I completely disagree.
I agree with you, Karthikeya. It is what DW says is rather sweeping. And I'm not sure whether the FTA per se will result in such a large-scale, turbulent redefining. It might happen. I don't rule it out. A redefining in relationships is always possible. But that will not happen overnight because of the FTA. That might happen on account of other organic reasons and over a longer period of time.
Absolutely.
So it would be reading too much into the FTA to agree to what DW might have said.
No, absolutely. I really ran short of time. You know, there were a lot of questions. So I'm sorry and thank you for all of you to join me on this conversation. Tomorrow we'll have a running coverage from 11 a.m. till Prime Minister makes a formal announcement, which is supposed to be after 1 p.m. So this was On Point 1. After a short break, here News9's insightful conversation with Ram Madhav on the changing world order.
रश्मि,
हाँ?
ये मैडम बड़े शहर से छोटे शहर बसने जा रही है, बताओ।
अंकल
इंडिया के छोटे छोटे शहरों में ही तो है बड़े बड़े अखाड़े।
नए नए दावपेच सीखेगी और फ्यूचर में मेडल जीतेगी।
और बेटा इनका फ्यूचर?
बड़े पापा, SBI लाइफ से इनका फ्यूचर सिक्योर है।
तभी तो इसकी जीत का इरादा पक्का है। करो पूरे अपने इरादे,
अपनों से किए सभी वादे।
SBI लाइफ अपने लिए,
अपनों के लिए।
Open it up, what do you see? A champion inside you and me. Run, sing, build, dream so high. Touch the stars, reach the sky. At Orchid School we all believe every child's born to achieve.
तुम डेस्टिनेशन वेडिंग के लिए बजट रोते थे, पर पिक्स कितनी अच्छी आई हैं।
बहुत क्यूट लग रही हो।
ऑब्वियो, अपने दम पे शादी करने का ग्लो।
इनकी जिद ने किया डेस्टिनेशन वेडिंग का सपना सच, अपने दम पर। टाटा कैपिटल पर्सनल लोन्स के साथ।
world is witnessing a phase where the powers who made the norms are dismantling it themselves. On this issue, I am joined by Ram Madhav, President India Foundation. So we live in a very different time. New rules are being made. Order is being destroyed, changed to suit country's own interests. Let me begin this conversation with you by asking you, have we entered again a great age of big power rivalry?
Antonio Gramsci was a renowned Italian scholar and statesman of 1930s, early 20th century. There was a time, a similar kind of situation in the world in 1930s, which ultimately led to the Second World War also. He made a very interesting comment at that time, which is very relevant for us even today. He said, the old order is dead, the new one is yet to be born, and the interim is the time for monsters. We are witnessing the interim between two worlds. We lived in an order which has today almost crumbled.